it going, everybody? Steve from Broken Galaxy here, and welcome to this week's episode of Push Start to Listen, where we take a look back in the week in terms of video game news. A little bit later week this week, but still some pretty interesting things to talk about. Let's begin. A little bit of news this week from the world of assassination as IO Interactive announced that they're changing things up a little bit going forward with Hitman 3. They're still going to be doing the contracts and escalations and new elusive targets, but they've announced 7 premium packs coming to the game soon, all of which are based upon the 7 deadly sins. Each pack is going to be $5 or $30 for the lot, and here's a quote from IO's announcement. Hitman 3, 7 Deadly Sins, will be released over time through 7 unique content packs. Each of the 7 packs are focused on a different sin and include a visually distinct contract, sin-themed unlockable suit, and at least one sin-themed item that can be used across the world of assassination. It's cool that they're supporting the game. I think people were a little weary about the long-term support of the game with the announcement that they were going to be moving away from Hitman and going forward with their new 007 game. And there were maybe some mixed messages coming out about, what kind of DLC you should expect. I think at this point it's a little bit too much to expect new locations, new maps, things like that. I think this is kind of taking the place of that, but it's cool. It's allowing them, if you have Hitman 3 with all the other features installed, everything from Hitman 1, Hitman 2, that's a lot of maps. That's a lot of game that they can play around with. So I think that it's nice that at least they're doing something. They're re-exploring older maps. And re-exploring newer maps. I know that the first one that comes out is on March 30th, and it takes place in Dubai, which is the first map from Hitman 3. And that's a map that I played through Hitman 3 a couple of times now, but I feel like maybe I did, but it always felt like I didn't see everything that map had to offer. It is a very visually striking map. So it's cool to see that they're doing something going forward. I know that team is gearing up, and I'm sure they are all very excited to work on the James Bond game. But the thing for me, though, is I want to know when ray tracing is coming, because that's going to look incredible. I try not to focus on rumors, because rumors are just that. I wait to see when things actually become fact, things are actually happening. But this one this week kind of caught my attention a little bit, and it's a possible binary domain remaster. That was kind of the headline associated with it throughout the week. If you dig into it a little bit deeper, I don't really think that that's what's happening. But here's kind of the gist of it. If you're not familiar with binary domain, it was a game released during the Xbox 360 era of consoles, and it is kind of the very definition of a B game or a AA level game. Daisuke Sato, who's currently with the Yakuza series, but was the co-director of Binary Domain, has once again expressed interest in doing something with the game. He was asked about the game becoming backwards compatible on the Xbox One. It's one of the few kind of cult fan base games that isn't playable on the Xbox One right now. He said, personally, I'd really like to, and if possible, I'd like to go back and make a few changes that I didn't quite get to back then and maybe redo some parts too. Obviously, this has led fans to get excited about a possible sequel once again. He has talked about that in the past. Personally, I really enjoyed Binary Domain. If you know what it is and know what you're getting into, it is a very, very fun game. I don't know why, but I always kind of lumped it into that same category as a game like Vanquish. It's gameplay-wise, aside from the fact that they're third-person shooters, they're quite different. But it's a game that's not trying to be more than what it is. It's not trying to be this huge, big-budget, game that's gonna, dominate the landscape. It's the game that everybody's talking about, but they're good, well-made games, and they have a certain kind of attachment to them of players that are willing to kind of look past maybe some of the flaws and some of the shortcomings. I don't think we're going to get a remake. I don't think we're going to even get a remaster, but I would really like to see the game become backwards compatible and placed on Game Pass so more people can enjoy it. It's lived on kind of largely by this dedicated fan base, and honestly, there's a ton of memes about Big Bo that have kind of pushed this game, a little bit, making it a little bit more well-known on, internet forums and things like that. But it is playable on PC, but I want to say that there are some problems with it, and I don't know how many people are going to be willing to go out of the way to go buy the PC version, but if it pops up on Game Pass or Game Pass for PC, then I think, you get some more eyes onto it, and maybe if enough people really show some interest, maybe we get a remaster, maybe theoretically we get a sequel. I think the likelihood is slim, but man, I would really like to see it pop up on Game Pass. It's time for everybody's topic lately, and that is rumors about the new Switch. And I know I decided I didn't like commenting on rumors just a moment ago, but I think at this point, it's a foregone conclusion that this thing is happening. You know, there's confirmation of Nintendo ordering parts to manufacture it. I think if you're at that stage of the game, that this is pretty much happening. But this one's a little different, and that's that it's going to use DLSS to upscale the console to 4K when connected to the TV. If you're not familiar with DLSS, it's a technology by NVIDIA. It's actually deep learning superscaling, and it allows you to have the game running at a lower resolution to your machine, but output it at a higher resolution. It's kind of lengthening out the mileage you can get from your PC. That's not to say that people that don't have a higher end computer right now, like a 3070, 3080, 3090, aren't using it, because some games it does benefit. Cyberpunk is a big one. DLSS can help you a lot in getting that game running at a kind of a smoother clip, I guess, for lack of a better term. But this makes sense on the Switch. I don't play my Switch a lot, but I have been lately. I picked up Let's Go Pikachu a couple weeks ago, and I've been playing it, and I've been playing it in handheld while we're, my wife and I are watching TV. I'm playing it, and I just got to a foresty area. Let's say, describe it as an area with a lot of stuff happening on the screen. My character, the Pikachu, I have another Pokemon following me. There's all this grass, trees, other Pokemon out in the world, other trainers out in the world. It's definitely the most stuff that's been on the screen since I started playing the game, and it is chugging along. I mean, it is brutal at times. I was kind of surprised. It's Pokemon. It's a flagpole franchise for Nintendo, and Nintendo's usually, they're the wizards of getting the most out of their limited hardware. So I was really surprised to see this. So it's kind of the first time where I'm like, yeah, you know what? A more powerful Switch doesn't sound that bad. I don't know if it's 100% necessary, because it's not going to compete with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. It doesn't need to. They're not trying to, and that's not what I'm trying to get to, that Nintendo needs to do that. They don't. They have a whole other market, a whole other demographic they're selling games and systems to. But I think from a developer standpoint, there is going to come a point where they're like, guys, we can't make our game for the PS5 and the Series X and then also for the Switch. We've seen how difficult it's been, in how many developers have expressed how difficult it has been to develop for both the PS5 and PS4, the Series X and the Xbox One. Developers don't need to make things more difficult. That's the last thing that they need. Getting games shipped in a playable state is hard enough. So it is nice to see that Nintendo is doing something in that regard to hopefully make things a little bit easier and maybe decrease some of the performance hitches that the games have been having, especially when not docked. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting system. It sounds like Nintendo is kind of making the right moves, making the right choices with this thing. But we'll see what the price and availability is if it comes out this year. So there's news coming out this past week that the PS3, PSP, and Vita digital stores will be going away. And that has sparked an entire conversation about video game preservation. I saw a great line on Twitter about how strange is it that it will be easier to find a copy of a game on Super Nintendo versus a game that was exclusive to a PlayStation store for one of those three platforms. For a very long time, I have been of the opinion that physical media has always kind of been the better option. Digital is more convenient, absolutely, no doubt about it. But for most of the things that I have collected or used, from music to movies to video games, I always preferred physical. At one point, I had an absolutely colossal movie collection. I mean, we're talking in the quantity of thousands of DVDs and Blu-rays. I eventually had to downsize that because I was moving and it just was not going to fit in the apartment I was moving into. I kept the movies that were kind of near and dear to my heart. I don't know if you can see it, but over my right shoulder, that are several hundreds, getting close to 1,000 records. Those of which I will never, ever get rid of. Music is far too important for me to downsize any of that. I've also got some stuff that's worth some money, would be very hard to replace. But that doesn't mean I listen to exclusively vinyl records. I have 100% embraced streaming. It's absolutely fantastic. There's some stuff on streaming you can't get on vinyl, just like there is vice versa that does justify the cost of vinyl sometimes. But I have very easily embraced streaming in terms of a digital way to experience music. For video games, I worked at a video game store for a long time that sold a lot of retro games, and I amassed not an impressive, but, probably better than average video game collection, just because working at the store, you have kind of first dibs on what comes in, and you can get it at a much lower cost than what we would put it out on the floor for. When I made that same move where I downsized the movies, I downsized all the video games. I actually sold all of my video games except for my Atari stuff. I had some Atari stuff that's pretty hard to find, and that funded the entire move. That bought me all the furniture I needed to get. It paid for, security deposit, all that stuff, and it's not a move that I have regretted. I kept a very, very few things that were sentimental to me out of that collection. So I've always been firmly in that camp that physical is going to be better. And there's a few other reasons why. Working at that store and living where I live in a suburb of a city of about 115,000 people. But you don't have to go very far to be legitimately in the middle of nowhere, where your closest neighbor is over a mile away. It was very recently that a lot of people in this area were able to get broadband internet. There were a lot of people that were stuck on dial-up and DSL simply because the cable companies did not view it as a smart business decision to make the infrastructure to bring internet to those people, and it slowly happened. So for that reason, I've always preferred physical, because there are a lot of people in this area, and I'm sure other areas around this country, that do not have access to internet or do not have access to fast internet. And I have certainly taken that for granted, having fairly fast internet. I had to take care of some business out of town at the end of last year, and I was living out of a hotel for a little while and using hotel internet. I knew that I was going to be gone for a while, so I brought my Xbox just to kind of keep myself occupied, and I tried downloading a game on the Xbox, and it took 2 days. So I was like, boy, I wish I kind of had this on a physical disc. Now, granted, there's a lot of current games that you pop the physical disc in and you got to download a day one patch. And if it's an older game that's been out for a while, maybe use several patches to get everything up to speed. So, that's kind of a separate thing. But I have, aside from those instances, started to maybe embrace digital games a little bit more. And that makes it tough, because a lot of people are probably in the same boat that I am. They're finally maybe coming around to it. And with the advent of new systems, especially with the PS5 offering a digital-only version that doesn't have a disk drive, you're relying on digital products. And I don't think anybody is ever going to change my mind that if you purchase a digital product, you do not own that digital product. At any time, servers can get shut down, stores for consoles can get shut down, and you may not have access to it. Now, hopefully, if you bought it digitally, they would allow you to be able to re-download that game as long as it's still associated with your account, but there is the possibility that that doesn't happen. So, with these going around, or with these going away, it does raise that very, very important debate about video game preservation. What do we need to start doing to preserve games? For some older physical games like Sega CD games, CDI games, stuff that was kind of in that first boom of CD-based games pre-PS1, disc rot is a real thing. It's not as prevalent as the internet's going to make it out to be. I personally don't know anybody that has experienced it, but I have seen accounts online of people like, no, it's legitimately a thing. I have a few games that I can't play anymore. That's why emulation is important. That's why stuff like the Mister is important. It shouldn't be hard to find a video game to play it. Now, if you want to buy a physical version and the game is rare, there's always supply and demand, but it shouldn't be hard to find it. I used to tell people all the time when they would say to me something like, Earthbound's a rare game. Earthbound's not a rare game. I can go on eBay and find dozens upon dozens and potentially even hundreds of copies of it. It's an expensive game, but it's not rare. So I understand if games get expensive. I understand if things get changed. Obviously, once it's digital, you're kind of locked into that price. It's not like I can go and say like, oh, I have this digital game and it's worth X number of dollars. That's not how that works. But it shouldn't be hard to play digital games from older systems. There should be a way to preserve these games, and that's kind of where emulation comes into play. And emulation should definitely not be demonized. It should definitely not be looked down upon. And I know that there are some video game collectors that, you know, turn their nose up at emulation and people that play their games on their computers like that. They're doing it because that might be the only way to play those games. They might not want to spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars on a Super Nintendo game. That doesn't make it a bad thing at all. We should all be working together to keep video games playable for as long as possible. Before we wrap things up on this episode, I wanted to talk about kind of a development for me in terms of what I'm playing. I typically don't talk about what I've been playing. A lot of times I'm playing older stuff that's not really relevant to the news and relevant to what's going on. But I ended up getting a PS5. I entered the NewEgg Shuffle, which, if you're not familiar with what that is essentially a lottery system that happens 2 to 3 times a week for select products. You put your name in the hat and potentially they draw it. If they draw it, you have, I think it's like 6 hours to make the purchase, and I got picked. I got a PS5. I had to buy a bundle. It was not cheap. The bundle was the system, 3 games, and an extra controller, so you can imagine how expensive that was. But I was really excited to get it. I picked it up. I got rid of the 2 out of the 3 games I wasn't interested in, and I kept Miles Morales because I was very excited to play that. And then I went and picked up a couple other things to play on it. The reason why I wanted to talk about this isn't so much to just like flex that it's cool that I got a PS5. It's that I did not realize how many issues the PS5 had. I haven't really been following it because I don't have one. So the issues that people were having were just kind of inconsequential to me because I just assumed that because they're so hard to get, by the time I got it, things would be patched, things would be updated. But boy, did I have quite the night when I finally got that thing up and running. So I got it on a Wednesday, and I didn't get a chance to play until Friday. So Friday night, clear the schedule. It was after I think it was after I filmed this last week. And I was like, all right, let's get this thing hooked up. And so we're hooking it up, and my buddy told me, there's a phone app you're going to have to download. So I download the phone app, log in on my PlayStation account, and a couple of cool things happened. Like halfway through the installation, it was like, hey, if you have a disc, put it in, and we'll start installing the game for you, and maybe it'll be ready by the time everything's all set up. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I put Miles Morales in, but I knew I was going to play Astrobot first, which is already pre-installed on the system. So everything gets going, and everything seems to be okay. Fire up Astrobot, everything is good. I play a little bit of the game. At this point, it's pretty late in the night, and I really didn't have time to play a lot of it. But then the problem started when I went back to the main menu. UI was missing. Spider-Man was no longer installing. There were a lot of issues. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't figure out how to turn the system off because, typically, you press the PlayStation button, there's an option to turn it off. All of that was gone. So I turn it off, turn the system back on. System won't turn back on. So I had to boot it into safe mode, and I'm like, oh man, I hope I didn't get a dud. I hope I don't have to call Sony and have this thing be sent back and wait however long to get it. UI is sort of filling in. It was really weird. If you've seen the PS5 UI, there's kind of like these squares that have like the icons for the games. And some would fill in, but some wouldn't. But you couldn't click on any of them. If I pressed the X button on any of them, they wouldn't open. They wouldn't do anything. And I was like, man, this is really weird. So I gotta go to bed. So the next day I get up, the thing is really screwed up. You can't start a game. You can't do anything. I had to factory reset the system. I had to reinstall all the games, and still tons of UI issues. Can't access the PlayStation Store. Can't access PlayStation Plus. Just nothing is working. After about maybe 5 hours of messing around with this thing, reading posts online of people that ran into similar issues, because I was like, man, I wonder if I'm the only one. Turns out I am far from the only one that have had these issues, and I really underestimated the problems with the PS5. But finally got it up and running. I played through all of Astrobot. It's really, really good. It is one of the most fun, simple games I've played in a long time. I'm about halfway through Miles Morales right now. Very much enjoying it. Spider-Man was my favorite game of that year when it came out. It was right up there with Red Dead 2, but Spider-Man just, something clicked with me for that game. I also picked up Ghost of Tsushima. I'm going to start that next. We also picked up like the complete collection of Mortal Kombat just because I missed out on the last Mortal Kombat and I wanted to play it. And I've been playing a lot of Fire Pro Wrestling, which I just re-downloaded because I had purchased it on PS4. And the show comes out next month. Super excited for that. Ratchet & Clank looks great. So I'm very happy to have it. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that because if you get a PS5 right now, you luck out, maybe get one at a Best Buy. You do the shuffle like I did and you get one. You go through the queue at PlayStation. Schedule out some time for yourself to potentially deal with any issues that come your way because they were plentiful, unfortunately. But with that being said, that's going to wrap things up for this week. I want to thank you, as always, for watching. There's going to be some stuff coming up on the channel in the near future, some non-video game related stuff as well, I think. I'm going to be trying to stream on Twitch. It's been rough. I keep making promises I'm going to stream on Twitch, and then it's just... there's a lot of stuff going on with our house that needs to be taken care of, and between that and day job, I just feel drained, and I don't want to be on Twitch not fully energized. It's just it's tough to do, so no more promises. I'll stream when I can. I'm gonna try and stream soon, but I'll stream when I can. But be on the lookout for some new stuff coming on the channel soon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.